We're having a digital world town hall where we're basically focused on gathering and discussing some of the things that are going on in society, some of the reviews of advancements for what we've been able to accomplish this last week within the digital world, and then just general question and answer. So we're grateful for those that are here, especially for those that are providing support for it. Looks like we even had John on from Australia. It's been a long time, but kia ora. And we've also got Wally on, and this was a kind of a last minute, but this is a private membership association. Some of the things we'll talk about may be forward looking, and we're talking about a simple model. We kind of brought it up earlier. You know, this is kind of the ecosystem here. But before we get going on it, we've asked Billy if he would give us a prayer as we get started.
Absolutely. If we could bow our heads just briefly, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Ko te wihi ki te atua me whakakarori tono ingoa inga wā katoa. I roto tō inga tapu ai Ukraine. Father, we thank you for today. We pray that you would be with us as we embark on this meeting today to discuss issues that are vitally important to your children on this world. And we just pray, Lord, for wisdom. We pray for clear hearts and minds. And we pray that that truth will be discerned and that we can collectively contribute to solutions and encouragements whereby we can face what's coming down the pipeline at us. So, Father, thank you for this time. Please, may your Spirit be amongst us. The Holy Spirit help Mike and his leading out in this meeting. And we pray and always ask these things in faith in the loving name of Jesus. Amen.
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 And just to go through that, start just one more quick second, just so folks understand. Let's see here. We're talking about a decentralized model where digital assets or digital phones connect in with decentralized storage and identity and all the other systems that can basically be realized. As we went through, the discussion today will be around historical tools and technologies that advanced over the last week, some of the things that are happening, and then just general Q&A. From a support standpoint, we've got Wally. It looked like John, but I don't know. And some of the things we're talking about are private for the private members that are associated, and they may be forward-looking statements. Again, as we dig into this model, you can kind of see this here. It's really important to understand kind of how it works, but ultimately, like this last week, people are just like, how do I use it? And so there's different countries that will have different currencies that will have their own applications that they pull down, and then that will basically give them the ability to log into any of the different countries where they can create identities and systems off of. This last week, for those that may be new, a good example is, being able to log in, such as this. So literally, I will just. When you log in, you have the ability to actually create different things. For instance, this last week, we've seen things from a business standpoint that have basically been stripped. So I just logged in with my phone. And when I come in, one of the first things that you can do is you can actually create a digital business. So you can create different types of businesses, but the jurisdiction for these businesses is the whole world. And then you can see over here where you can sign up foreign entities. So in this digital world ecosystem, you can work with different parts of the world, from Fiji to Saudi to Tuvalu. Hopefully we can add the Hawaiian Kingdom, which we should. And so these are actually full-blown businesses. So this is a Switzerland business as well. But you can basically create businesses in these different parts of the world. Why do I say this? Who really cares? Because what's happened this last week, Donald Trump has, and I'll let someone else talk because I really don't plug into the news. Can someone describe to me what's happened here? For those that are not seeing, actually, let me also share this screen because some of the folks here, I've got to turn this on. So I'm sorry, I didn't share all the right screens. What I'm talking about, can someone describe to me what's going on with President Trump and the last ruling this last week, where he got fined and businesses taken? Can someone tell me what's going on here? So it looks like $350 million in damages. He's not able to operate a business with his family members, and someone has been appointed the ability to be able to take over and run his businesses. That's, I haven't And it looks like because certain assets were leveraged to get other loans. Again, I'm totally ignorant when it comes to this. So if there's someone that can talk to this, it'd be greatly appreciated. And
Hey, good morning. Hey,
Sure.
Michael.
Hi.
How are you? It's John. Sorry.
Hi, John. Hi,
You
John.
mentioned me earlier. I didn't
Hey,
wanna
it's
jump
good to
in
hear
there,
your
mate.
voice. Really good to hear your voice. Miss you.
likewise. It's good to see everyone. Bob, Billy.
It's been too long.
Yeah. I
Do you
haven't met the
do you
other
know
folks
anything
yet,
about
but-
this? Do you know anything about this case stuff that's going on?
All that I will say is, and it's from a standpoint from afar, and gentleman Charles touched on it a bit earlier, I think it's just distraction. I really do.
Mhm.
It might be a big one, but I don't see it coming to fruition. Even if it does, I think this is going to further perpetuate
Do you know why?
the distraction.
Does anybody know why they're doing it and why this would be a target and why would they do it in New York? Why would they target a business when there's no victims on the other side of it?
Exactly.
And
They say,
keep
so
going.
they say that he fraudulently falsified financial data so that he could get loans at a lower rate.
Okay.
So I heard that the banks
You
don't.
mean like what everybody does in the entire world or has done for forever, basically.
You got it, James.
Well, no, it's
I mean,
actually
the
no.
corruption
The general
is on full view. The corruption and to the level that it's being taken to, it's doing more good than harm, I believe.
But no,
Anyway.
I believe what I don't know whether this is exactly what Michael's getting at, but this is what I think is going on. I think that what they're doing is then this will lead to trying to devalue people's property. Because remember, Agenda 2030 is all about you will own nothing and you'll still be happy type thing, right? So if they can start devaluing property and the arse falls out of all the fiat currencies, because fiat currency is not money, but we don't need to go into that right now. They can have the arse fall out of fiat currencies. People's properties aren't worth as much money, and everybody goes into negative equity, and they all have problems and this, that, the other. Everybody's going to have to be giving up everything and getting government help and government interventions and lots of other outside help that means that they actually lose their rights rather than gain anything. And that's what it's all about. So Trump is just a puppet at the end of the day. We can all think that he's funnier than Biden. He can string a sentence together. He's not some walking dead. But at the same time, Trump is still controlled by Johnson & Johnson and other big pharma companies. He still pays the piper in some way, shape or form, and is still ultimately just a front man for the bullshit. And the thing is, the people that are truly in control are never public facing. Never, not even Bill Gates. As much as I hate the bloke, none of them are. They're all hiding behind the scenes. Because if you want to rule forever, you don't have 2 terms as a president. You just control the presidents. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I don't think we could have said it any better. And when you control the presidents, or I mean, look at what they've done with Donald Trump here. You basically can do a couple things. You have someone that writes a document with a signature, and the next thing you know, a bank can levy an account. A bank or an individual or a court can levy an account. The business no longer operates because remember, when people sign up for business, they sign up in a jurisdiction that is actually within a county or a state or a province within a country. And so they're asking for the right to do business, and they're asking for a right. Because if you notice, like if you go into one of these businesses, so this is a digital business or a digital organization, and this is why I started here. But let's just dig into one of these. So let's go into let's see if I can just grab a simple one. I mean, this is probably a. So if you jump in here, it's a business that has. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do it within the Hawaiian Kingdom. I'm not even logging in. So this is one of 4 countries that's currently rolling the technology out. So their whole, the countries will be able to operate. Now, if you notice, I'm using the same phone to log in here, but I'm actually, when I log in, I can see what businesses in this particular jurisdiction that I've actually created. And by the way, these different jurisdictions will cross-pollinate with one another. So for instance, let's say that this Paradise Rentals can actually take different currencies, but it operates in the digital ecosystem as well. So you've got You've got a business that was created, and let's look at kind of a public page here. So you've got a business, you've got a decentralized ID, which is unique. That's tied to the digital world. So the jurisdiction for the digital world is the whole earth. This ecosystem might just be in the Hawaiian Islands, but you can notice how it spans and has the ability to do business globally. For instance, people didn't understand that currencies historically could actually go from continent to continent because they had a physical issue. Within the last 3 decades, this physical issue is gone. And so now this type of an ecosystem that can actually identify whether it's an organization, if they're true or not. It can look at assets for the organizations. It can see different members or managers of the organizations, and data can actually be shared in such a way where it's actually private. So people can see that this particular identity is me for those that know me. But if others that want to see it, they'd have to validate. So if they wanted to look at things around certificates or agreements or maybe councils or organizations or registrations, they'd have to actually request it. So let's say there's a vehicle here. They'd have to request the ability to see it, and I validate that they actually see it. Do you see the difference between what's going on with Trump versus what can happen in this ecosystem? So literally, an organization says you no longer can be in business, you no longer can have bank accounts, you no longer can operate your business. But even if people wanted to do business with this individual, his whole world that he set up, because he set it up on a foundation that was built on sand, in a jurisdiction that isn't owned by the individual, it's owned by a central system. So to your point, James, if people take over the system, then they get everything, right? I mean, that's when we talk about these secret combinations. Let's see if I can find a couple slides here real fast. Let's see. So these secret combinations operate in different parts of the world, whether it's technology, media, health, finance, which ties to not only banking, but the stock markets. You know, the health doesn't tie just to healthcare, it ties to pharmaceuticals. But when they actually all work together behind the scenes and then go into governments, they can take over the governments. And the way that they take over governments is basically by technology. The software developers who actually worked with some of the systems, Dominion voting systems and others that took over these governments, have all been honest around what the software can do and how it works. So let's just say this is reality, and the noise that we look at, like with this judge stuff here and this Trump stuff here and this document, all of this, Charles hit it right on the head earlier, it's all just noise. So let's just put it on a shelf and focus on the next systems, like what we're seeing within the Hawaiian Kingdom, within Tuvalu, within the digital world, and how do they actually provide freedom for the individuals? So what I just pulled up was my identity on actually creating this. This is a rental organization, so it actually rents homes, if you say, and you can actually see how different homes can actually have different values or assets to them. And people can say, you know what, I'll provide financing for that home, or I'll actually own a percentage of that home, or I'll use a percentage of that. And maybe it's not a home. For instance, when we look at this meeting, there are many individuals that are actually calling, and I'm going to pin one of them. Bob, I'm going to highlight you here real fast, bud. So this particular meeting, you can see that Bob is actually calling from his vehicle. He's driven across the country. He's focused on things that are, you know, and there's other people on this call that are actually from their vehicle. So what's the difference between a business or a home or a vehicle? Do we have different rights within them and within jurisdictions? So for instance, a state, does a state have a jurisdiction that may be different than a federal jurisdiction? And is that operate different within your home versus within your car? So for instance, if you shot somebody within your house, is there certain rights? If you shot somebody within your car, is there certain rights? And have you gone through a process of understanding, if you did the same things in your car that you do in your home, do you have certain rights? What is the American dream? The American dream has been built up to own your own home. And we've talked about it before. Really, the American dream is to be able to finance your home, to leverage a system based upon your signature of your future earnings and work, to pay a monthly payment, to have the value of your home paid in advance for you. But what we don't understand is that's a form of slavery at the same time, but we're choosing to be a part of it. And all we have to do is choose not to be a part of it. So what if, and I'm going to jump into some of the details of what we've been able to advance here over the last, by the way,
So Michael,
go ahead.
Michael, I would venture to say that people are not choosing it because they don't understand. They don't understand when they go and get a mortgage or when they go and buy a home. They don't understand the system that they're entering into.
Just like
People I know with haven't got a clue. They
Yeah.
don't know anything but
go
CNN, New York Times, and they think that's reality.
Go a step further. What's one of the most crazy times of our lives when we just are blinded and young and dumb and everything is swirling around us and changing and we just don't even know which way is up? Can anybody answer that? I'm gonna answer from my perspective. When I was young, I'd just gotten married and I just had barely, like literally we waited 3 months before we started having kids and we had our first child. And a gentleman on this call introduced me to another gentleman, Charles, introduced me to a gentleman named Kamanu, who when I first met him, we locked up because he actually built his own birth certificate for his kids. And me as a young father, I didn't even know anything about, is there a different way? You know, you just go to the state and, well, do we just take the baby out of the hospital? Do you go to the hospital? All of these things are very important questions. And I would even argue that before the baby comes, you know, in some cases, a marriage. And so in some cases not. But let's say that you've got, where does a marriage get authorized? It gets authorized by the state. Where is it actually issued from? It's issued from the county. Where's your ability to vote? It comes from the county. So if the marriages are issued from the county, which by the way, within the last almost 4 years, there's been 36,000 marriages done cryptographically online from the county of Utah County in the state of Utah. Now, when they do it, can they actually prove that they happened? Yes. Is there a certificate? Yes. Do they divulge certain data around it? Yes. But look at the data that's tied to this. So there's a document around the actual identity of the marriage that's happened. So people, when they go through this process, they're asking for a right to exist, for a marriage to be acknowledged, for a birth to be accepted. And that's kind of where we start, right? And then from there, it's like, okay, well, what about a business? What about a vehicle? What about an asset? And that's what I'm trying to show is you can start a business that has assets. Not only can you start a business that has assets, but you can actually validate those assets and third parties can actually verify without even knowing who the members are in a jurisdiction that leapfrogs over the counties and the states and the provinces and the countries. And it can be recognized in such a way where, and some of you may still need convincing that there's a digital financial system that is coming, and that digital financial system will actually have the ability to track everything, what comes in, what goes out. We talk about accounting systems and ledgers and books of what they call double accounting. So you basically make a payment. So, go ahead, say again.
I shouldn't have interrupted. I was just going to say double entry bookkeeping.
Yeah, so in this system, it's not just double entry, it's triple entry. So you don't really even need accounting systems to check and balance. You don't need the bank ledgers to match up with the accounting system to then file certain things. So for instance, does that mean that the ability to actually do audits and taxes can actually be public? So if there's an asset here, you could actually, and if I jump into a different one, let's go back into a different company here. Well, maybe I don't have one that's got anything. Let's jump in this World Football League. So we're going to look at this football league. No, that's the wrong one. I want to go let's go to the NFL because the NFL has a bunch of players to it. Or yeah, we should do that one. Let's go into this one. So let's say the NFL has assets that are teams, and then let's say that there's team members that also get traded assets. Some of you like sports. I don't pay a lot of attention to it, like I don't pay attention to the news. But imagine if you could actually have something where the world could see every goal, the organization itself, the actual teams, and then you drilled into who actually owns the teams, and you could see what else they own. So this particular individual has some Marriott Rewards points, has some American Express points, has some Hawaiian dollar, has some US dollar, he owns some coffee. There's a lot of transparency in this, right? And most are probably thinking, well, I don't want people to know that. But the key is through giving it away, we can actually become free. We can hide in plain sight because the individual behind this asset, you don't know who it is, but you can verify that it actually happened. So what we're talking about is a financial system that can be replaced, an identity system that can be replaced. And when we're talking about physical assets, some of us are living within homes. I'm gonna pop up some of the advancements that we've been able to accomplish. So imagine a system where you can see different assets. So for instance, let's say you have a car, and instead of taking that car and registering it with a state, do you register it with a county or a city or with the federal government? No, they always force you to the state. But can you drive that state between lines? Why is the United States of America different states and different autonomy? Our founding forefathers decentralized the authority and autonomy from the federal government, not to the states, but to the counties, and particularly physically to the sheriffs. And so, do you register your car at the county? No. Do you register it at the state, right? Why do you register it at the state? And what control do they get when you register it at the state? Can you then take it from state to state? Do you have to have a driver's license? Do you have to register your vehicle? Do you have to have a license plate? Do you have to have insurance? If you do, where does the insurance mandate come from? It's state by state, right? But let's look at Bob. So Bob is sitting here in his vehicle. Bob, what state do you preside in or live in? Most of Florida, okay? And you can make up whatever state you want, especially where you're physically located. And what state are you currently in?
Nebraska.
And so in Nebraska, do you have to get a license from Nebraska to drive on the Nebraska roads?
No.
And what if you said, you know what, I'm not going to live inside of Florida, I'm just going to live in Nebraska. Do you have to get a license?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you, what makes you think that you have to get a license?
State law says that if you reside in a state, you have to have a license in that state.
So that's a perspective and a belief that we just automatically assume that is reality. So for instance, I bought, when I bumped into some of the Teslas, I was like, this is absolutely the future, not because of the physical cars. As a matter of fact, I think the quality of the cars is less than some of the other vehicles like BMWs, et cetera. But the software and what it could do is the future. So I literally bought almost every Tesla except for the Roadster. And when I bought it, I would buy them out of the state because in the state that I was in, Utah wouldn't actually give them the dealer's license to exist. So I would buy my cars out of California and I would ship them over to Utah. Okay. And not only that, but for instance, like here, I've got a driver's license that is from Tuvalu, right? So let's say I'm not even from Florida and I'm not from the United States. And I drive and I come to, what did you say, Tennessee? North Carolina? Nebraska. So let's say I come to Nebraska. Can I drive? So I've got just a license that's literally out of a different part of the world. Can I drive? Can I drive on the roads in the United States of America? Could I rent a car? Could I, so there's a lot of questions that are out there and people just assume that I have to get a license if I'm going to stay. So the reason I bring up the whole Tesla topic is I intentionally did not register the car or my license in a particular state. And I got pulled over for it. And then my conversation with the officer was, why do I have to actually register in a different state? Why do I have to move it? Well, sir, you don't have the license plate. You said you're living here and you have to move this. So I intentionally didn't pay the ticket, but I went to court. And so when I go through the process in court, they cannot legally force you. Now, can they put you in court and can they run you through a process and waste your time and send you letters and send you levies and send you notices and try and dock you? Yes, they can. And that is normal and natural. And that's exactly what we're seeing this last week with President Trump around a business. And that ties the business. It's not just the business. It's the life. It's our lives that we just assume we have to register a business, whether it's within a country for a federal employer identification number to be taxed, whether it's, go ahead, Charles, you can interrupt anytime, bud, or whether it's within a state or whether it's within a city. But I would argue, why do you have to do that? Well, you have to do it if you want to open a bank account. To open the bank account, to use their currency to be able to take money from others. And that's how they trap. So when we look at some of the advancements, actually it's over here. When we look at some of the advancements last week, we're talking about taking vehicles, whether it's a particular model, and managing, digitally managing the ownership of a vehicle, data that may come off of vehicles. For those that are not aware, any new vehicle that is shipped currently has to have tracking devices inside of it. Where is the vehicle? How fast is the vehicle going? And basic data around, tires and fuel, those types of things. In the future, by the end of next year, 2025, it's mandated that they also have to have kill switches in them. This is a federal mandation. So we're talking about laws that are now, vehicles are federally mandated to have certain things that happen to them. Okay. Remember, they're still tracked and traced by the actual state. And if you haven't seen the little cameras on the sides of the roads that look for license plates, those license plates are tracking the actual numbers and where they're going, what they're doing. And there's tons of data. I know the people that run the companies that track this stuff. That's why I'm telling you, it's not just a matter of tracking and tracing, but controlling. And so it's not just one vehicle, but other vehicles. It's not just the ownership of the vehicle, but the actual, you can look at it from a standpoint of, the data that comes off the vehicle. So let's say these future vehicles have cameras on them. There's cameras inside the vehicles and outside the vehicles. And not only are they using their video, but they're using audio as well. Where does that data go? Because most of these devices are web enabled. Who owns that data? Would you buy a car that you did not own the data? Some people just don't care. It's like, kind of like my mentality before. I really think that this Tesla stuff has a lot to do with the future because of the software. It's got nothing to do with the physical capabilities of the car and even that it's electric. I could care less about that stuff as well. It was a matter of the software and how they can remotely be managed and controlled. And some of the things we did was literally reach out to Tesla and say, hey, you need to use this technology like gateway management. Every car should be protected. It's its own little bubble. Nothing can come in, nothing can go out. Little do we know, they don't care. I shouldn't say that Tesla doesn't care, because I think if in effect, a lot of these companies are actually going to care in a big way, because they do care about giving the individual their own data and privacy back. I would argue that what COVID has done is weakened a lot of major companies, whether they're car manufacturers or airline manufacturers, to a point where literally they cannot financially sustain on their own. I'll give you an example here in the Hawaiian Islands. The major two airlines, one that's inner island, was just sold to not Southwest, but Southern Airlines. And the other one was sold to Alaskan Airlines, which is Hawaiian Airlines. They started at about a long time ago. It failed about a month ago, and it just went through this last week. And the point that I'm raising here is, it's because these airlines didn't play the game to get the money to be in the central system. And the reason all of this stuff ties together is around control. And we have certain assets that we actually think are ours, whether it's a car, whether it's a home, whether it's multiple cars, maybe it's an identity, maybe it's the ability to actually register or control, maybe it's even a house, maybe it's the land that's the house on. In some countries like Fiji, the land is always a part of the actual government, and they have a control responsibility to help manage the land and or lease the land and then provide value. They call it a superannuation fund, which is like Social Security. So when folks get older, instead of everybody paying and contributing into this fund, it's anybody that wants to come live off the land and lease the land. The payments for the lease goes into this trust that actually pays like Social Security. So the locals, there's a difference between visitors and locals. And it's a balancing act that's very important within decentralized islands or nations that's different than the states that are united, like on the mainland. But you can put a house on it, and the improvements for the house is separate than the land. So how do you manage it? How do you finance it? How do you insure it? How do you maintain it? So there's all these details that basically tie to these different individuals or these different assets. And we talked about this before. What if you actually have a child? What do you do? Now there's an alternative. You can literally cryptographically have a birth certificate, or in this case, an adoption. So like literally imagine like what's happened to me over the last month or so, a formal adoption process. And like, so when we jump into this here, you can see, let's see here. Notice this adoption. So this is something that is a new process. By the way, Charles, thank you for, I know that you were, at least I think you were the driver behind it, but this is actually the system for it. Charles, can you see this?
Absolutely.
So this is what you started. So you can actually go through a process of filling out a name, filling out the child's name, parent 1, parent 2, and then the certificate process. And this actually issues 3 different decentralized IDs, 2 that are derived keys. So you and Kamanu, basically, you would fill this out, and then you would sign it, and then Kamanu would be invited to fill it out. In this case, it's two families that did an adoption, but it's 2 parties, so to speak. I guess you could do it with 1 as well, that did an adoption of another. So it creates another identity. Now, it could be an identity that's new or derived. And so for those of you that are not aware, you can actually have a parent-child relationship with derived keys in this new decentralized world. So a parent can actually manage their family. So for instance, in this particular ecosystem, you can see a family that is here, or there's even other ecosystems. I'll pull up a different one in a different environment. So you can see within a different ecosystem, a different family. So, but you can see that there's actual ecosystems that can actually be created. And when you look at the different children, you can see, okay, they may be younger than 18. What apps are they running? Where are they going? So the point is there's a parent-child type relationship that's also ties to like an employer and an employee, which is in a way a form of slavery. It's just modern day slavery. But it's one person says you're going to do this or these things. And some folks say, you know what, I'm going to comply with that, and I actually want to pay for it, so I will do that. But in this relationship with a state and an individual, whether it's a citizen and a country, or a national and a national and a nation, these are relationships that need to be respected in a way that are not centrally controlled, or those secret combinations can actually take over. So you can birth, adoption, marriage, or even businesses, a business, how it can actually be created, how it can be validated, how it can be in other jurisdictions, and then how they can actually work with different systems to basically tie them all together. Now, some people would say this is really good, sounds wonderful, but I live in reality today. And I make US dollars by selling coconuts. By the way, that was one of the big mishaps this last week, is a guy says, I only take cash. And I don't want to take whatever you're slumming. My country is this, and I won't be specific, but I only have allegiance to this. And I'm like, well, if that's your allegiance, why are you taking US dollars? And the lights started going on. All they did was use US dollars. And so it's like where you're choosing to be in that system. And so anyways, make a long story short, some of the advancements are around assets. And some of the things we're focused on are two types of assets: homes and vehicles. Okay. So imagine, and this is some of the advancements. I'll go through some of this real fast, which, by the way, there's 72 hours. I don't know if this is actually one of the certificates for adoption. There's actually a new one that's digital that we've come up with this last week. But for those of you that are not aware, we're in the last 72 hours of being able to create the American Shopping Party, which is a political party within the Hawaiian state. It's not for federal recognition, but for state recognition to be able to do certain things. And we're only less than 50% of the way through. It doesn't look like, from my perspective, that the signatures are going to fly in. But at the same time, the Hawaiian Shopping Party will become a reality, because it's all about people basically making purchases, people choosing to make purchases with a certain currency at a certain time frame. And so it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to purchase a coconut at a market once a week versus I'm going to purchase land. How does land actually work in this new digital ecosystem? Can I actually buy it? Can I sell it? Can I finance it? Can I insure it? All of those are questions that are very valid and have to have answers before a system like this can actually be stood up. So here's an actual ecosystem with digital dollars within a jurisdiction, literally 30 acres, that has 150 organic trees that are 20 plus years old, or in some over the last 20 years, that is real land that will actually be able to be insured, will be able to be financed, and will be able to have assets that can actually be managed by it. So imagine a system where you can actually log in, just like you currently do with Hawaiian Life or Tuvalu Life or Samoa Life, or even Digital Life or Clear Life, these different apps, which, by the way, they're all interchangeable. It's just a currency that you're going to base it from. But what if you want to come in and get insurance for a vehicle, or maybe health insurance or life insurance, or maybe insurance on a weapon? Some people would say, why would I need insurance on a weapon? Some people can already figure that out. But the point that I'm driving at is, imagine an ecosystem that issues digital insurance for physical things based upon digital. I'll be specific. This last month, we went through an insurance policy for 3 drivers and 3 vehicles, and it was $7,400 per year. But if you actually installed a tracker, it dropped down to $5,800. So think about that. They know who you are. When I say they, I'm talking about the insurance company. The insurance company knows who you live with. Now they know where you go, what you do. And people don't understand this, but the trackers can pick up much more than just a GPS coordinates. They can figure out what you're listening to. They can figure out how you're braking. They can figure out how much fuel you have. They figure out how you drive. I'm going to play a quick video and just try and turn on some lights, and maybe, let's see if this is there. No. Here we go.
So I found out who actually owns BlackRock, but there's something really weird about it. Because by now we know that BlackRock,
Which, by the way, I'm going to link this up in your head. The insurance companies, majority of them, the big ones, are all owned by BlackRock. That's why we're going to dig into BlackRock. We're going to, who is BlackRock? Where does it come from? And tie that in your mind to the secret combinations we were just talking about.
in the top 3 shareholders of basically every corporation in America and beyond. And they do this using our money in things like retirement accounts, pension funds, IRAs, exchange traded funds, mutual funds. But most people don't actually know who owns and controls BlackRock. We all know that it was founded by Larry Fink, and he's the face of the company, but he does not control it. When you try to find out who does control it, you'll usually find this list, which is the top institutional shareholders. Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street are right at the top, just like every other company. But this is not the whole story. Because if you dig deep enough, you'll find out that actually Merrill Lynch owns 45% of BlackRock. and they're considered an insider, so they don't show up on the top institutional holders list. This merger took place in 2006. So actually Merrill Lynch controls BlackRock in a big way. But who controls Merrill Lynch? Well, Merrill Lynch is actually a division of Bank of America because Bank of America bought them out during the 2008 financial collapse. So who owns Bank of America? Well, nowadays, Warren Buffett is the top shareholder of Bank of America because he owns Berkshire Hathaway, which is his billionaire investment firm. I'm still not sure what this top one is, the 25%. That's an anomaly, and I cannot corroborate what those shares are, but I found these shares. This is a screenshot from Berkshire Hathaway's 13F where they tell you all the things they hold. And I totaled up all of these Bank of America shares, and it equals 1,032,000,000 shares. That's 13% of Bank of America shares, equal to $33 billion. But I also dug in a little bit into where Bank of America came from and who founded them. And all modern banks are crazy histories of mergers and acquisitions and banks changing their names and merging with other banks, probably for no particular reason. But Bank of America traces its roots back in two different directions, one of which we're not going to talk about. And the other one is back to this Italian dude named Amadeo Giannini, who acquired what was then called Banca di America d'Italia. Sorry for that accent. Over the years, it changed its name to Bank America, and then in the biggest merger in history, merged with Charlotte-based Nation Bank in 1998. So I just thought it was interesting that half of the lineage of Bank of America was founded by this Italian dude that got really into Italian banking back in the early 1900s, you know, when like there was a certain Italian organization that was doing a lot of things with money back then. I'm sure it was all above board though, obviously. But anyways, back to the weird thing that I can't figure out. Bank of America owns Merrill Lynch, who owns the vast majority of BlackRock. But they don't have anyone on the board as far as I can tell. Usually the biggest shareholders of a company have representatives on the board that sort of represent their investment. But I've just shown you the whole board of directors of BlackRock, and none of them have any real ties to Merrill Lynch or Bank of America, which seems pretty weird when you own almost half the company to not have any board members. The plot thickens. So two things. If you want to follow the history of Bank of America down the other trail, you might want...
So I'll just stop right there. But there's some interesting stuff there. This last week, I actually reached out to Larry Fink, who's actually the CEO of BlackRock. And I won't go into details of where, but I need to publicly state as well as there's central systems that not only are, let's see if I can find, here we go. So if you haven't, let's see here. No, well, so what I'm trying to turn the lights on for you is what happened to Trump this last week around a judgment that takes away a business, the bank accounts associated with it, as well as control from a central standpoint. It's because he started it within the central system. He also wanted to become president and try and rehelp the system. But ultimately, it comes right back to what Charles was saying. It doesn't matter. It's already done. All we can focus on is not the noise of the system and the world that's going on all around us, whether it's wars, rumors of wars, financial collapses, rumors of financial collapses, because in the end, we all have the ability to buy something, to spend something. And it's through buying and spending that will actually create the future. People talk about this collapse of the US dollar or other currencies. It's because of the faith of it. It's the faith of the individual in that certain country, within that certain currency, within that certain ecosystem. So if there's new systems, and if they're all going digital, and we want to build on something that's actually stable, for instance, and most people don't know this, but over the last 2.5 months, there have been massive attacks on what we've been building. I'm talking to the point of, accounts being shut down without a phone call, without an email, nothing. And I call in and I say, is this normal practice to just not even call? Have you guys even called once? No. Have you reached out? Have you, like, your office is right next to ours. You know, we literally, I could throw a rock from my office in Orem to the bank where we open the account, where we have relationships. Why would you just close accounts? Well, we can't discuss that over the phone. Okay, well, email it to me. We can't email it to you. Well, what do we do? Where are we at? Nothing, sir. I can't open your account. Well, we can open a new account for you, but the account that you had is closed. It's gone. Hold on. What about the accounting? What about the standards? What about? So my point that I'm trying to say is it's not just one account that gets shut down. It's like Trump. The next thing you know, overnight, what he has in assets, in liquid assets, in cash, in the banks is gone. That's where the faith in the actual system starts breaking down. What happened in Venezuela 5-6 years ago is the same thing that's happening in America. But what happened 126 years ago, where something was literally taken over in the Hawaiian Islands with the Polynesians, is happening right now. And the way to be able to rebuild these systems is not just a system that's within a certain jurisdiction, but it's taking the whole earth approach. Notice how there's many other things that you can do within a digital ecosystem versus, like, I'll even pull up, like, I'll pull up a different country. So let's pull up this country. I'm going to go ahead and log in. So I'm using the same login system. So now I'm logged into 3 different interfaces. And by the way, these are some systems you can walk away from after you've logged in, because the user can't do anything without your phone and the identity side of it. Why? Because those keys that you own. So if you notice, there's limited things I can do here. 2, 4, 6. I get a driver's license. I can file a dispute. I can join a council. I can start a business. I can register a vehicle. But these are very limited things compared to what we can do in the Hawaiian ecosystem. So there's a couple more things. So you can see there's some more compared to what you can do in the general world. So there's a lot more that's possible. But imagine if you built a business that has its own assets, has its own currency, can interface with any other country's currencies, and is real time, doesn't have charges associated with the transactions, and you can actually cryptographically validate who you are without giving up your identity. Well, a lot of you already understand the benefits and values of doing something like that, but how does it actually tie to the real world? How can I actually take an identity? So I can take a child, I can take a relationship, I can take a driver's license, I can validate that I can actually drive, I can validate a jurisdiction. And by the way, the whole reason that they took Trump to court within the state of New York is because New York was one of the original places where UCC laws were actually adopted. Not all states adopt them. Tennessee, I think Mississippi didn't, but there's a bunch of states that have adopted these UCC laws. And if you have a bank account that has an account within those different states, you can actually do it. Which, by the way, I don't know if you realize this, but lots of, I'll pull up, and I'm jumping all over the place because I'm trying to turn on lights for you. Look at this company that is basically an aggregator of brokers for insurance and finance, okay? Notice how they have different companies that basically do it. So this is not an insurance company, it's an agency. They sell for other companies. Look at, these are actually finances. So you've got an example of financing and insuring an asset by one central company. But if you notice, do you see a state that's missing here for loans? And do you see a state that's missing here for insurance? I'll point it out for you. It's Hawaii. Why is it? Why is it that there's only 2 title companies in the whole state of Hawaii? And why is it that insurance and financing is not available?
I can answer about the title companies.
Go.
I've had 2 different friends from 2 different backgrounds in the past that said they were coming to Hawaii to start a title insurance company. One was from Ohio, the other one was from Wisconsin, I believe. And they said they looked at the rules and the laws and they said they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yep. And a lot of it is when you really understand how the state of Hawaii started and what they started from, you find that it's a house of cards. Does that not mean that they don't have employees and assets? They do. But also means that they're built in an environment that they don't own. And I'm not just saying that because there's not insurance or title companies or financing companies here, because people will come here and do it because they're doing it against real assets. But when you start looking at what's happened, and I'm going to jump back out here and go to, when you look at the different countries that the digital world is working within, so within the Pacific, you can see, like, for instance, these countries here, let's say Fiji, they look at land management very different than anyone in Western society does. They think, hey, I got to buy the land, then I build the house, then I own it. Unless I don't pay my property taxes, then I can lose it. And, oh, I don't own the water that falls on it, and I don't own the soil that I can actually grow my veggies in. They can control that. And if I do this with my animals, they can control that. Or if I don't do this with my animals, they can control that. But I can't go and grow food to sustain life. I personally did it in Utah on a simple farm with hot water, warm water and cold water, natural flowing, 5 acres. Tried to do certain things with veggies and fruits and animals, and it was literally, in the end, the city that physically took them while we were gone. It was just mind-blowing to me. But there's many other people that deal with the same type of reality, and it's not just a matter of saying, woe is Trump, woe is me, woe is the existence or experience, because it's not about that. It's about building a solution for humanity, for future generations, where they don't have to be controlled. It's kind of like down in Fiji, they literally said, we want to actually live the way we can afford within our means because we can grow our own food. And it may not be that type of spice or that type of look or that type of meat, but they can actually have health. Like if you look at health within countries that are even developing countries that live off of the land, the health that they have, lack of heart attacks, lack of diabetes, are very different ecosystems. So the report out this week is all around last minutes for the shopping parties, some of the stuff that's going live there. You basically buy local once a month, have a party doing it, use a different currency. So in this particular case, you're buying Hawaiian made and you're using Hawaiian dollar to be able to do it. From those simple steps, it changes how we as humans interact, as well as what we're interacting within. So that's one big thing. The advancements around having assets, let's say a vehicle, and then tying those vehicles to an individual, and then tying that to an identity, as well as a registration, as well as insurance, is some of the big advancements that we've focused on. We haven't set up the insurance companies. We haven't set up the financing companies. But if they're focused in the digital ecosystem and all the financial transactions are transparent and all of the data around using a vehicle is still known, they still have an ability. I'll see if I can find one of the mapping systems. They still have an ability to be able to know if the driver is a good, safe driver, how far they drive, how fast they drive, how fast they accelerate, how fast they, decelerate, and all of the details in between. You can still share that data, but you don't share your identity, but you can actually pay for it within the same system. So really what it comes down to is, if we back up probably 6 years, people started saying blockchain this, decentralization that, Bitcoin this, we want to end the future. You know what? One of the companies reached out to me. They said, we heard that you know decentralization better than anybody else. We're in the insurance industry, and we want to know how we can use this data to help better, insurance. And this was before a lot of these apps that actually tracked the cars and the little sensors that plugged in. And we started looking at it. And we said, you know what? Blockchain is really just based around timestamping, proving that something happened at a certain time, and it can't be questioned or altered because you have multiple different nodes, if you will, that validate that that actually happened, whether it's a transaction being sent or a file being stored. Those two mechanisms change everything. So whether it's a stock, whether it's a currency, whether it's an asset, whether it's an asset that we own, whether it's a digital asset, a physical asset, a home, a piece of land, a bicycle, a scooter, a boat, you name it, any of these things can actually be digitized through following this process, whether it's within the Hawaiian Kingdom. For instance, once you create a company, that company, let's jump into, I'll use this one right here. So this rental company, let's say they wanted to create an asset. You can create an asset just like this, and then you can actually have shared ownership within this asset. And the asset class or type is whether it's an asset, a coin, a dollar, infrastructure, you know, the whole NFT is a whole nother. By the way, if you haven't seen a viral post on NFTs, somebody asked me about what my favorite NFT was, and it's just continuing to go viral. So I basically said it's not about NFTs. It's about exactly what we're talking about here. It's about a new type of financial system that's built on a new type of identity system that gives us sovereignty and freedom. And this guy was like, his mind was blown, and he went and posted it. And the next thing you know, we had like 12 million views on one channel and 1.7 million views on another, all from that simple conversation. Now, some people don't believe it. Some people don't understand what we're doing, but it really is just that simple. If a system adopts something that can actually do transactions, whether it's an asset like this, so we can create let's say we create an asset, and we want to link this asset. Let's say it's a piece of land to a certain dollar amount. Let's say we're going to link it to a US dollar. Somebody's pinging us. So we're going to link it to US dollar, and then there's going to be, let's say it's 100 or 1,000. Yeah, we'll just do 100. I'm gonna. I don't want to use that term. So I'm using, now remember I told you that people could go and you could be logged in and not even be if you have to actually to do anything material, you have to actually validate. So this is actually taking me as an individual and validating that I can actually create this entity. It has to be. So I'll go and create this entity or this asset within this entity, and then I can drop it onto my phone, and then I can share it with others. So whether this is a vehicle that you want financed, and then what you do is you'd share it with the financing company. And then when you make a payment, let's say in this jurisdiction, a Hawaiian dollar actually gives me the asset percentage that I get off of that. So at any given time, I know what I've purchased and I know what I've owned. So it changes how the paradigm works for slavery. I'll give you an example. In the United States of America, if you get a mortgage, it's a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac conforming typical mortgage, you're going to end up having 30 years or 15 years of payments. It's either 30 or 15. That's the two standards. So if you end up missing a payment, it literally pushes out. They can start a closing process just off of one, unless you do other things, which is a whole nother conversation. So literally after one missed payment, you actually are possibly in default. Versus like in New Zealand, Billy, have you ever heard of an overseas experience where people can actually take a break and say, you know what, for 3 months, I'm going to Europe for this and this and this, or I'm pausing my mortgage. Have you ever seen
Yes.
It's normal down there in New Zealand, right? Like,
Yeah, it's called a mortgage holiday.
mortgage holiday. Has anybody in the United States or Canada or other parts, we've got people from Australia on here. Would you like to go on a mortgage holiday? The point that I'm saying is the mortgage holiday is built up within a financial system that thinks about that uses the math and calculations, which, by the way, if we ended up, let's just go to like, let's just pull up one of the banks in New Zealand. What's the interest rates that people are getting paid right now for US dollars? Let's say Bank of America, that organization that we just talked about. How much do people actually make in the bank within that? Look at this. You got literally, you can actually get paid. Let's see, I want to private. This ecosystem uses its own currency with its own exchange, and people say, well, the exchange rate is doctored, or the percentage that you can actually get in a bank is different than these other financial institutions. What most people don't understand is the International Monetary Fund basically just suffocates the ability for buyers and sellers of the current currency to actually transact. It's not more complicated than that. That fluctuates who can buy, who can sell, and so the fair market value can be controlled based upon who's actually in that. So the World Bank, in any of these different developing countries, so when I talk about developing countries, a lot of these countries are involved with the IMF and they're involved with the World Bank. And when you understand the World Bank, we're really talking about the Reserve Bank for the US dollar. It's all one system. And so if you just build a system that does equal things to it, lending, insurance, asset management, business management, identity management, land management. So for instance, some of the things around land management is absolutely amazing. So imagine if we actually really got into a business where not only is it land, but it's actually vehicles. And it's not just vehicles that you can drive from point A to point B, but it's a vehicle that you can actually live from. People talk about this tiny house movement. People talk about one of these headlines this last week, and maybe people can tell about this, but big city mayor asks white houses for helps for migrant influx. Now, I want to take the racist stuff out of that, but you can kind of understand, they're starting to understand that 10 million people illegally moving over the border and just shipped into different parts is causing a problem, a housing problem. Here in Hawaii, that's not the same reality. You're not seeing the same types of influx of border crossings from Mexico type ecosystem. But for a long time, you've seen these cities throw certain people on planes and just.
You are though.
Yeah, but they literally just ship. It's not new. You've been seeing.
No. So in Hawaii, they've been doing it for decades.
Exactly.
I had a friend who worked in all the restaurants in Hawaii have a lot of migrants that are not illegal. I had one that I knew he was going back and forth all the time, and he was a top chef in a restaurant in Lahaina, and I found out that he was actually illegal, but you could get your ID so easily in California, it was ridiculous. And he would go back and forth to Mexico all the time. He finally made enough money out of Lahaina that he built a house in Mexico and for his family, and he moved back. So they do it all the time.
Well, what I was trying to say was the 10 million folks, it's not like it's impacting Hawaii any more than what's already happened. Everyone, so people that have, whether it's homelessness or drug issues or other things, cities will give them the one-way flight, and they're just done. They're out. But that's not happening to the same level of the migrants coming to the mainland. So they're busing them into different cities. And then keep going with what you were talking about, Charles, because what's the next step? He got an ID, right? So in the state of Utah, even in the state of Hawaii, there's a step that you can go through that says to get an ID, what they call the real ID, which is mandated by May of next year, 2025. Do you have to have a social security number to get that ID? Do you have to be a citizen to get that ID? Do you have to, and then why do IDs expire? So the ID side of it, so for instance, have we ever heard of illegal immigrants driving a vehicle and killing somebody and then saying they didn't even have a driver's license? Why were they driving? There was issues with that decades ago, and so they started issuing driver's licenses to these illegal immigrants. Now, I'm going to be honest. If I was born in Venezuela and my family was there and the borders were open, I can almost guarantee that I would end up figuring out how to get my family all the way up into a country like America. Now, does America mean that it's this wonderful environment? No, but I can tell you from the perception, and I'm backing up like 20 years ago without knowledge. I'd probably just stay in Venezuela. But the point that I'm trying to drive at is I don't blame people for migrating. But what I do drive massive accountability is the people that are selected and not elected, that are in leadership roles, that are keeping the borders open, that are enabling people to come in by design so that the next voting catastrophe that happens will be a different voting catastrophe because the game is already up on the last one. If you don't believe me, what was it, 2,000 sheep or 2,000 mules? Go watch that. It's a very big eye opener. I mean, it just spells it out. Super, super transparent. And again, we don't need to worry about that type of noise. What we need to do is focus on the future and how we can actually add value within these different types of systems. So I'll stop blabbing. There's a lot of stuff that we've gone through. I hope that you're able to at least glean some of the updates. Any questions or topics that you want to discuss that I mainly haven't discussed so far?
Well, I have one.
Go ahead.
You seem to, obviously, you know about the sovereignty movement. You're a PMA. And you've hinted at that in many of the things that you've said, but you're not talking about individual sovereignty specifically and operating outside the entire legal system altogether.
That's exactly what we're talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about. So for instance, this individual here within this image here, his identity is his own, but yet he can register a vehicle, be licensed to drive the vehicle and drive the vehicle and all of the assets associated with it. Just like what I kind of showed you over here, the license plate, the registration. Note, if you dig into these, you'll find there's no full name for that individual or for the actual vehicle. So when you look at his license plate here, you can see, or his driver's license, you can see that his identity is sovereign. It's his own, and he's operating within a jurisdiction that is independent from the existing system. So when you talk about sovereign movement, that's spot on around what this is all about.
In one of those images you showed a minute ago, the person's name was spelled in all uppercase letters. That's a corporation.
That's just that you're talking about the design of it. I'm with you there. So
all right.
It should be, yeah. So you can see his name is not spelled in uppercase.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you're talking about, but you know, it doesn't, we're saying the same thing. It's a matter of getting it built, developed, and implemented around adoption. You know, one of the individuals earlier talked about what is your goal and what are the clear companies focused on and what is the digital world's measurement, and it's all around adoption. So right now it's a matter of how do we get systems to massively adopt a better way, a way that actually gives identity back to the individual, which is the same thing you're talking about, whoever made that comment around sovereign nation, sovereign individual. So next topic, question, thought, comment, feedback.
Before we hang up, I want to connect with James somehow. I haven't been able to do that so far.
You can probably just message him on here, so he's here for you. It'll disappear.
Raymond, I think you've been chatting with Danielle, and she mentioned trying to get us on a three-way chat or something. So I don't know what's your best platform.
For openers, email. I haven't understood why we couldn't just talk on a phone call, but that hasn't worked.
I'll let
I mean, Raymond, I don't think I've got your number though, so that's probably why that hasn't worked.
I'll give it to Danielle.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, if you get it given to Danielle, she'll pass it on to me, and I'll connect with you. Okay.
All right, thank you.
And Michael, just from me, since the start of the year, we've obviously had issues with the website and stuff. And you know that, I love all the talk around all this stuff. I always want to know what I can do to impact things. And the one thing that I've always thought is trying to grow the adoption of the phones. And obviously they've been excellent to me. Obviously some people are a little less tech savvy, sometimes struggle to grab that, sort of get their heads around it sometimes and things like that. But ultimately, my 620 phone has worked brilliantly for over 3 years, and I'm very impressed with it. At the same time, I know that obviously it needs to move with the times, and we need to get better cameras, and we need to get even better hardware and all that kind of thing, because you know what it's like when phones move forward quickly with regards to things like that, and everybody wants their cake and eat it. So ultimately, are we still focused on trying to sell the phones and grow the affiliate model? Because it just feels like there's been less of a push toward that. And I'd love to still be able to push it out there, but the only way to do that is incentivize people and make it easy.
Yeah, let me level with you and help you to kind of understand what's happened. Remember when I said for the last almost 3 months, there's been an attack. It's not just on businesses, but it's also been on the technology. And a lot of it just happens all at the same time. But we actually had an internal sabotage thing that occurred, which hit what's gorgeous is even with, all the level of impact. So it's not just data centers going down, servers going down, it's individuals internally trying to sabotage. And it wasn't anyone. We have 13 offices, and it was just one of the offices. But what's gorgeous about it is the decentralized systems, even with folks from the inside trying to kill it, couldn't take it down. What was impacted was the Clear United backend, which you saw. And so literally which is back up and all updated and running. So we didn't want to push any of the elements, so to speak. And so instead of, but we still wanted to have phones sold and service and all that. So literally we just said, hey, we won't pay commissions on them. We'll just drop the prices and then we'll push them out. But since the back end's back up, it's absolutely intended to, drive phone sales, increase prices, and get back out there. So what I would say is these prices are only going to be where they are for probably another 2 weeks, if that. And then there's going to be a price increase. Are we focused on building new units? The future models here are not going to be released because we've literally, when we look at, like, for instance, I think we're 35% adoption. Yeah, 35% adoption here. So that model,
about 57 on the 424, I think.
So we're 28% here. So we're not.
I think the 424 is about 57, 58%, I think. But
so
it's more like I wasn't aware there weren't going to be any rewards paid on the phone since the start of the year either, which will upset some people, to be fair. But
well, that's because some of the outage side of it. But there's still absolutely there's anything that someone is using a influencer key on, there's still rewards that should be paid. The audits are basically all done around historical stuff. And I would say people inside of your circles, they don't sell the subscriptions, which is where all the audits basically hit. There are a lot of the abuse. So there should be rewards
exactly. But I mean, because the validation codes weren't working, the referral codes weren't working properly and stuff. There's quite a few people that need to be sorted out on that front. But also, like, I just want to. It'd just be nice to get a really good steer on where we're going with the phones and what we're doing, because if we get another year down the line, we're going to have phones that are like 4 years old that, although I like this, all the software around the Clear decentralization stuff, the cameras are just not going to be so behind the times with regards to what else is out there. And look, I just know what modern public perception is like with regards to that, what people want and don't want, because I chat to people about them all the time. And that's my concern. That's where I want to be trying to help as much as I can and see where we're going.
Completely. So this is actually one of the new phones. And when we look at, here's another, and when we actually, you can see here, these cameras are they're advanced and modern and up to spec, but we've just got to have future products that actually gets the adoption. Because right now we could go about it from a different approach, and what we're all focused on is mass adoption. And so that doesn't mean, for instance, let's say that we were 100 times or 1,000 times more successful in launching the Clearphones. In my opinion, we still don't even hit a dent in the overall market of what the potential or need is. And I'll give you an example here real fast. So when we talk about market adoption, Android, there's 3.75 billion units in the world. You know, this data is about 4 years old, actually older than that. No, 2026, this is 2000. So it's 4 years old. So 75% of the world is running an Android device, whereas 23% of the world is running an Apple device. Now, some people say, that's not true. All my friends have Apple devices. Yeah, because you're in a fluent ecosystem in America that a large percentage of them have it. But the point that I'm driving at is Clearphones are a very small percentage of it. And so what we've done is we've literally built out the technology so that it works on Android and it works on Apple. There's some features and functions that will be perfected on the Clearphones, such as, you know, contacts. You won't have to scan anybody. You'll have your own contacts, your own decentralized storage around identity. You know, these are all apps that are run within it. And, you know, when you look at ClearOS.app, these are apps.
How are they going to allow that though? Like, how are we going to actually get that adopted? How are like Apple going to allow Clear to run this on their system? And then also, how do Clear make their money?
So this is Apple running Hawaiian Life right off of Apple. So you can download it. So these are different countries that will end up deploying their systems, if you will, that will then run their own currency. So this is basically one for one particular country. Now, the second part of your question is, how do we make money? In this case, there really isn't a money-making effort. This is trying to help humanity from a standpoint of gaining adoption of a system that can actually decentralize systems for humanity. The opportunity for influencers to drive awareness ties to, you know, really the systems that are found over in this ecosystem today. We have to sell these phones that we currently have, and the goal is to be able to get these future product lines, these adoption numbers higher than the 35% and 50% and 28%. We got to get these higher so that we can then have these different models. The goal is to launch these in October, these future ones in October of this year. So, but, you know, the camera technology within these units is more advanced, but come October, there's going to be another round of advancements that are out there. A lot of it is just software. It's not hardware advancements. Go ahead.
Yeah. So first things first, I really think that I'm very passionate about this whole thing. And, you know, I've stuck through it through thick and thin over the last 3 and a bit years now since I got involved in January of 2021. I love the ripple effect calls. I think they're brilliant, but not a lot of people can always make it at the same time in the same place. I would, and I know you're such a busy man, and I get it, but I really, really think that having a video to say, look, this is what we've done so far. This is what we've achieved. This is where we're going. This is our vision. To have a video of that that's like maybe a short version, like a short 8-10 minute version, and maybe a more in-depth 30 to 40 minute version or something like that would be amazing, running through the stuff. And you know, properly edited and stuff. I think it would be really, really impactful and allow us to kind of get people in and on board again. We've got to rejig our marketing to get to a point where we can push this message out there without just relying on you.
Yeah,
we can't just go, right, we need to get people on the ripple effect and listen to Michael speak brilliantly and answer all these questions and give all these answers. I want to know, how can James Neal and James Neal's team of 5,000 people that signed up in the last few years able to spread this message and push it out there and get those people to then push it out there and spread a proper...
It's still the same kind of methodology. So for instance, this Hawaiian phone comes built with the software all built in. And we're talking a price point that's not crazy at all. I mean, this is so inexpensive. But this is decentralization. This is the future. And we're talking about a whole nother jurisdiction and country / kingdom that actually is standing back up, that can be an alternative to the craziness that's happening globally. I mean, we're talking about a country that is making laws that violates the core principles of why the country's there. You know, even here in the state of Hawaii, this last, I want to say within the last week, maybe two, they've come out and said, no weapons. You can't have a weapon. You can't have a gun. Your First Amendment right is gone. Because it's not.
I completely get it, Michael. It's just more like, how can I show that message to other people? So when I talk to them about decentralized technology, which a lot of people, in similar mind spaces to myself, of which there are many, that they then want to know, well, okay, what's this technology giving me that other things can't? And where is it been for the last few years? What's it developed? And then where is it at now? And what's going on in the future? And that kind of roadmap and a video demonstrating that, professionally done video, would go a long way to being able to spread the message and sell these future phones. Because people aren't going to go shell out $1,000, $1,200, maybe even $2,000. And obviously, if you want more memory, it's going to cost even more, particularly on the fold-out phones, on the 820 odd phone. Without that, it's so hard to push.
Yeah,
and so therefore, I work full time. I'm also doing this in my spare time, and I'm a busy person and like to play a bit of sport, whatever. But I want to be able to go and still chat to people with all the stuff that I share on social media all the time, and go, this is what we're doing, this is what we've built so far, and this is where we're going. And it's actually happening. These are the things that we've done in Hawaii. These are the things we're doing here. This is the ultimate goal. We have to support this now because it's a use it or lose it type scenario. And I'm very passionate about it. I just don't feel like, and I love all this stuff, but I just don't feel like I've got the utensils or the tool there, or the back office, or the reliable back office to be able to then go and actually make it happen. Because at the end of the day, some people get involved because they see money signs, they see clear rewards, and they see, I've got a good audience, I can make a decent amount of money doing this, and it's a message that I want to spread, and they want to see that. Other people, they just do it off the good of their own back, but they're not gonna. You've got to incentivize these people, and we've got to make it easy. And I think I know what's needed, having spoken to people, thousands and thousands of people over the last few years. I've probably spoken to like 10,000 people about ClearPhones over the last few years. So wow. I just know that I have a good idea of what's needed, and I just don't know how to get that going with Clear from a production point of view to give me what I need and what I think everybody needs around the world to be able to spread this. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. And a lot of it ties to really the dedication and commitment that we're working with within the Pacific, that takes the precedence to be able to give you the tools and capabilities to really make that huge splash. But hopefully you can see within the pricing and the ability to still get rewards at a lower price point, and then be a part of the decentralized systems. It's really is a capability to be able to be involved. But you're spot on.
Yeah, but I was just wondering, is there any chance of maybe finding some time to be able to produce something like what I'm talking about? Do you think that's feasible or not?
Yeah. Once we're through with this Hawaiian shopping party and American shopping party, we've got 72 hours on that. We can do that. That's not a problem. So,
would you mind if I just put down a few ideas in an email and just send them over so that I could, if we could do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, always welcome to, James. Happy.
Okay, all right, thank you. So sorry for taking up so much time on that, but
You're all
yeah.
good, bud. No, I know it's been a long time since you wanted to do that. And thank you for being so persistent and just pushing. Any other thoughts or comments? Charles, you said you've got a board meeting you got to bounce to. Were you able to wrap us up, or is it something that you've already jumped to? Looks like he's already bounced.
I can do your prayer now if you like.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. We'll go ahead and wrap up.
Okay. So this is also called Oli Mahalo. Uhola ia ka makaloala. Ua ike aloha. Kuka ia ka haloala. Avehi mai na lehua. Mai ka ho'okui. Ka halalaila. Mahalo e nā akua, mahalo e nā kahuna laea, mahalo me ke aloha, mahalo me ke aloha. And that is a thank you chant for all the manao and all the knowledge brought forth today. And with that, I will send a description of what that prayer was. But I gotta go. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you, everybody. Much love. Kia ora, Billy.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.